I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传是一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Thanks so much. And as always, good morning or afternoon or evening to you, wherever you happen to be at the moment. And welcome to the March 11th installment of the online Tao study group. An hour earlier than we're all used to in most parts of the United States, or some parts, I guess. Daylight savings time has occurred at 2 a.m. this morning. Another wonderful blessing of the cellular network, my phone, which has my alarm set on it to make sure that I'm ready for everything on time, adjusts for that automatically. Of course, all the manual clocks in the house do not. So we're running around resetting clocks like crazy people. It is March the 11th. We're still a little ways away from the official beginning of spring, but I have seen the first robins in Indiana. In fact, I actually saw them about a week or so ago on towards the end of February, which I found very surprising. That's a little early around here. And that for me tells me it's time for the annual Welcome to Spring talk. To evidence that, I have dandelions sprouting up in my flower beds and getting ready to pop up in the yard. The tulips are coming up. I just saw the first few of those poking their little heads up above the soil. And my maple tree in the front yard is starting to bud. So spring is definitely upon us. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of climate change and global warming, but I got to tell you, I'm always very happy to see those first few signs of spring and know that warm weather is coming. I have a heart condition, so I take a lot of medication for blood pressure and what have you. And during the winter months, I just don't seem to ever be able to get warm. So long about the time it gets to be 80 degrees and sunny most of the time, I'm a very happy camper. But that is not the reason that I talk about spring every year. Spring has a really special significance to me, and it may have for some of you as well, because it to me is a time of renewal. It's the beginning of new life. And I'm old enough now that, I look at the changing seasons with a bit of an allegorical view towards the stages of my own life. The older I get, the more keenly aware I am of the fact that I have fewer days remaining in front of me than I do behind me. And so, being able to watch the processes of nature at work, I find to be full of hope and a reminder that although things change, very, very little actually ever ends. I find a lot of hope and comfort in the reemergence of life in the spring. And I get reminded every year that the Tao operates and moves in predictable cycles, that the circular nature of existence is part of the Tao, and we observe those cycles in nature. And this is the beginning of one of those cycles now. I also reflect on my understanding that the movement of those cycles is not based on some kind of personified divinity. We're not, moving at the whims of some wrathful or merciful deity that thinks it's time for things to warm up. These are cycles that occur based on natural laws of physics and mechanics and the orbit of planets and the nature of the cosmos that have existed since before time. And that to me is a comforting thought, that those things have been in place for eons before any of us ever considered the spiritual nature of our existence, and will be in existence for eons beyond our own physical existence. For all intent and purposes, we can virtually say that those cycles will exist forever. It is true in, 5 to 8 billion years or so. It's very likely that our sun will become a red giant and consume most of the solar system, but I'm probably not going to be around here 5 to 8 billion years from now to check on that progress. So, as far as my 70 or 80 years on this planet goes, the remainder of the cosmic existence of our solar system is eternity. Something else I think about every year, and the longer I live, the more I consider this, is the nature of the changing and the changeless. We've been in the same place for long enough that for several years, I have seen the same pair of robins return to the same maple tree in my front yard year after year after year, which is a wonderful thing. I look forward to their arrival in the spring. I'm always sitting out front to greet them early in the morning. It's just kind of a thing. The male is kind of my buddy. He comes out and, hunts for worms and whatever robins do in the front yard, and he knows I'm not going to bother him. And over the years, he's gotten very comfortable with kind of approaching me, and there's no interaction or anything, but it's just kind of pleasant. There's almost this mutual understanding of or an agreement of some sort that says that I get to enjoy the beauty of that moment, and he understands I'm not going to interfere. But even though we get the same pair of robins back year after year after year, each year they raise a new set of chicks, and hopefully, although I have no way to verify this, obviously, hopefully each year those chicks grow up and become robins and go find a mate and find their own maple tree somewhere and repeat this cycle year after year at another house someplace. But every year that cycle repeats itself no matter what the outcome is. And I've been blessed enough to be allowed to watch this cycle unfold for a number of years. And it's fascinating to me. And it's just a little tiny view into the splendor that is the Tao of heaven and the wonderful and miraculous way in which nature works. Every year, I spend half my summer trying to get rid of a bumper crop of dandelions, and every year I fail. And every year I wind up with a brand new bumper crop of dandelions. I could open a salad bar. I don't know why it's always my yard. In fact, it's mine and the neighbors on either side. We seem to attract dandelions for some reason. But it happens every year. And I find that particular phase of springtime somewhat humorous, simply because so much effort is devoted to trying to get rid of those weeds. And it is truly an exercise in futility. But it happens every year. I create a cycle all my very own there that's shared by many of my neighbors as we try to get the dandelions out of the lawn so that we have, decent looking grass throughout the summer. Every winter, the maple tree that those robins are beginning to build a nest in right now drops its leaves. It gets ready to shut down and winter over, and if it didn't do that, the tree would die. That's a survival mechanism for the species of trees, for all the deciduous ones. As it draws its sap in towards the core of the trunk and stops expending energy, feeding the leaves that drive photosynthesis when it's sunny and warm out. And that's what causes the death of the leaves and the falling of them in autumn. And I watch that happen every fall. And with a certain amount of resignation, I realize that winter is coming, that we're going to spend, about 4 months freezing. But every spring, right about now, I watch those little buds pop out that are going to turn into beautiful sugar maple leaves, and the little seed pods that we used to call helicopters when I was a kid. They kind of fly on a light breeze and are just an awful lot of fun to play with. One of the most fun connections I have with my children throughout their young lives is going out to find those maple seeds and watch them fly. It's just a simple joy, just something fun. In each one of those cases, there's an element of change and a concurrent element of the changeless. The maple tree in the front yard is always the same tree, but every spring the leaves are new. Every year the robins are the same pair. One of these days they won't be. I know that day's going to come. But for now it's the same two robins. But the offspring are new every year. Every year I try to get rid of those doggone dandelions, and every year I get a bunch of new ones. This is a picture of the Tao of heaven painted in nature before our very eyes. The Tao is at the same time changeless and eternal and moving and changing at the same time. The Tao itself is constant. The manifestations are forever changing. And we can see that all around us. When I wonder whether or not the pursuit of this spiritual path has any basis in common sense and reality, when I wonder whether or not my thinking is clear and my judgment is true and accurate, whether or not what I believe to be the truth actually has a better than average chance of actually being the truth, I stop to consider these things. Because rather than philosophize about the ethereal and invisible and the potential and the maybes and the unanswerable questions as to whether or not there's a personified God waiting out there to send me to heaven or hell, it is so much more practical to me to be able to utilize the judgment of my senses and what I can observe and see and touch to infer that which I cannot see and touch. I think that makes sense. Anytime that I feel depressed or hopeless or down, anytime things aren't quite going my way, anytime that I'm wondering whether or not my direction is appropriate, my decisions are good, my judgment is clear, whenever I begin to doubt myself and my own direction, I remember those observations. I remember that everything changes. When I'm in a position that appears to be a bit inauspicious or a little less wonderful than I'd like, heaven forbid when things are downright calamitous, which doesn't happen real often, but does happen, I remember that everything changes, that everything moves in these cycles and in these circles of the Tao of heaven, and that those cycles are not permanent. Nobody ever stays at the top of the world or the bottom forever. In fact, most of the time we're either at the bottom moving up or at the top moving down. But the one absolute guarantee there is in this life is that the circle is going to continue to move, that the changes are going to continue to come. And so nobody is stuck either in the throes of absolute secular and spiritual ecstasy or in the absolute depths of despair. Most of the time we're somewhere in the middle. And that's okay. The coming of spring itself reminds me that life itself is a self-renewing venture. I'm watching it occur right now. It's happening in my front yard in a little teeny tiny microcosmic view of the Tao of Heaven. There is the life that was there before, the tree, the robins, the seeds of the dandelions, what there was left of my grass before the winter snow covered it all up and before the spring woke it. Okay. And I know that here in a couple of weeks, all of those processes that renew those living things are going to come to fruition. And once again, life will be renewed. I can't help but believe that for all of us, that same cyclical nature of living must be true. I think that the coming of spring gives us a little piece of the Tao that we can see and touch, because it's right in front of our faces as it occurs, which is a powerful image of both the essence and the manifestation of the Tao in our lives. Most of the time, if we want to understand the movement of the Tao, we only need to look as far as our front yard. That's pretty much a truth. But how often are we so ingrained in what it is we're doing, so entrenched in what problems we're trying to solve and the activities that are going on around us, and in the hurry to get from point A to point B, that we really don't take the time to stare out that front window and see the wonderful things that are occurring around us. And every year about this time, I take some time just to watch and commune with and observe this wonderful springtime process. And every spring, long about now on a Sunday, I remind myself to mention to you guys that this is the time to go do that. I don't know about you guys, but I find an awful lot of peace in the coming of spring. And I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for each spring that I'm allowed to live to see these days. You know, once you've had a heart attack or two, you come to realize that life is a gift and not a promise. And once again, I've been granted the blessing to see this wonderful time of the year begin. And that is worthy of mentioning, worthy of note, and worthy of observing. And I hope that's helpful for you. Thank you all very much for letting me share with you. I just had my last 2 teeth out a couple of days ago, and my mouth is sore, so I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you, Bill. Bill, recently in the news, there's a famous movie director who at the age of 47 suffered a massive heart attack, and he was reached in time, sent to the hospital where he was able to recover. And he tweeted to his fans that having gone through that experience, he felt, especially grateful, as if he was living on borrowed time, that he had already experienced so much of life, and now it's kind of like a second chance. So Bill, I'm curious, when you had your health challenges, did that also inspire in you a sense of gratitude when you emerged on the other side of recovery?
You betcha. Absolutely it did. I have had 3 heart attacks. I have a long and very colorful history in my family of heart disease. And unfortunately, I managed to inherit that. It happens. And so I had my first event when I was 40, and my last one, a couple of years ago. The last one left me with an arrhythmia which is an abnormal heartbeat that they can't manage. So they manage the blood pressure and everything around it to prevent the arrhythmia from becoming symptomatic. So, you know, when you want to talk about living on borrowed time, every day that I wake up and see the sunrise is a gift. And I am very keenly aware of that fact. You know, we know what's going to kill me. We just don't know exactly when. And it's going to be much sooner than later. But,
well, let's hope,
you know,
for my sake, hopefully not sooner, but later, as the case may be.
I am doing everything in my power to make that the case.
Yeah, and I think you know that Ed, you know, just as a coincidence, Ed also has arrhythmia.
No, I didn't know specifically what the condition was, but yeah, I knew he had a heart condition.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to just kind of briefly mention is this great summary slide that you have here. I find it very useful to even combine your points, you know, to be able to say that, hey, when you're feeling depressed, you know, one great way to do that, you know, not just to be reminded that everything changes, but also if you can step outside and commune with nature and sense, feel that change happening, you know, all in the big wide world, I think that can have a pretty powerful impact on your state of mind as well.
It does indeed. That's kind of what I was hoping to convey.
Well, it's excellent. To me, it's also interesting that it's the, you know, it's the external world affecting the internal mental or emotional landscape. So that, you know, there's a definite connection between the two, like the yin and yang.
I firmly believe that. I'm hoping that everybody else experiences that same thing. I think it short sheets our mental capacity if we don't. But it's something that we actually have to slow down a minute for and look at in order for it to happen.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位顶传十一鞠躬，斜翻一鞠躬。We're done, everybody. Thank you so much.